If you didn't know, the Pope actually has an army, and it is probably the most unique army in the world. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, I'm Father David Michael Moses. I'm a Catholic priest. If you enjoy these types of videos, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. A lot of things going on in the Catholic Church right now as we continue to mourn the loss of Pope Francis and prepare for the upcoming conclave, which will elect the next Pope. So one of the most interesting things about the Pope is he actually has a pretty intense set of bodyguards that work inside the Vatican. Found this great video about it. Let's jump right in.
If you've ever visited Vatican City, the world's smallest country and the home of God's representative on earth, you probably know where I'm going with this. Because the soldiers tasked with guarding the Pope, known as the Swiss Guard, do so by wearing what is very probably the most outlandish uniform of any military force in the entire world. But why exactly is the Pope protected by an elite force of Swiss blokes in clown outfits?
The Pope isn't just the Vicar of Christ, he's also the King of the Vatican, which we don't use those terms very often, but the Vatican is its own country and it has its own government, and the leader of that government is the Pope. So it makes sense that the Pope, the King, would have an army.
The Swiss Guard is one of the most unique and intriguing military forces in operation today. For starters, it's one of the oldest standing armies in the world, having been founded more than 500 years ago. It's also one of the smallest, with just 135 members. But thanks to the Vatican's minuscule size, Swiss Guardsmen actually make up about 16% of the nation's total population. That means there's a genuine argument for Vatican City being the most militarized country on the entire planet.
That's kind of interesting. I think if you asked what the most militarized country would be, you probably wouldn't guess that it was a primarily spiritual institution. Yes, the church's mission is to get souls to heaven, but even though the church is not of the world, the church is in the world, and we need to be effective in society, and part of that is security.
As for why the Pope is guarded by a Swiss army in the first place, well, whilst us European types like to poke fun at Switzerland for generally staying out of things in the face of war, it turns out that a few centuries ago, Switzerland boasted some of the most ruthless and efficient warriors alive. As a result, Swiss mercenaries were incredibly sought after, often being drafted in to bolster the armies of other nations across Europe. And it wasn't just their skill in battle that made Swiss mercenaries so coveted. They were also renowned for their insane bravery and unshakable loyalty, traits that made them ideal bodyguards for world leaders and other VIPs. And as I'm sure you'll agree, no P is more VI than the Pope.
It's a good turn of phrase there. You know, I do love the fact that I'm assuming this guy isn't even Catholic. He has a big YouTube channel that's pretty secular. But even he recognized the Pope is someone very special, very important person, VIP. No one's more PI than the Pope. No one's more... What did he say? No one's more VI than the Pope. I've actually really noticed this since the passing of Pope Francis, that so many of the secular news outlets are going back to this story, right? You have to kind of wonder, if this religious figure is so central to the world, is there something to the Catholic faith? I can't imagine there's another religious leader that obviously it would be sad and it would get news coverage, but I can't imagine it would get as much coverage, even affectionate, positive coverage, as the passing of a Catholic Pope gets. So I think there's something there.
In the early 16th century, the stellar reputation of Swiss mercenaries caught the attention of Pope Julius II. Even amongst popes, Julius II was kind of a big deal. He established the Vatican museums that are still visited by millions of people today, over 500 years later.
The Vatican museums are absolutely extraordinary. If you haven't been, I would definitely check it out.
He approved plans to turn St. Peter's Basilica into the largest church in the world, a title it's held ever since. And he commissioned...
St. Peter's is giant. When you walk in, it is breathtaking how big it is. And it's definitely worth visiting if you haven't.
Some random painter-decorator by the name of Michelangelo to spruce up the ceiling of the newly completed Sistine Chapel.
So this is where the conclave is actually held now, as Sistine Chapel, right underneath the image of Jesus judging all of humanity. Kind of a reminder to the cardinals to make sure they vote according to their conscience, because God is always watching.
Whatever that is. Men of the stature of Pope Julius II inevitably earned themselves a few enemies on their rise to the top, and so, in 1505, he asked Switzerland if they wouldn't mind lending him 200 of their finest mercenaries to form his personal guard. Soon enough, the men were on their way. It's quite a long march from Switzerland to central Italy, but apparently all roads lead to Rome, so at least there was no chance of getting lost. Still, it took a good 4 months for this elite fighting force to complete the journey. The Swiss soldiers arrived on the 22nd of January, 1506, and they've been there pretty much ever since. The bright colour scheme was chosen to reflect the house colours of 2 of Italy's most important noble families at the time, the Della Roveres and the Medicis, both of whom had supplied the Catholic Church with several popes over the years. And whilst the various archaic elements of the uniforms may look pretty ridiculous to the modern eye, it was...
For the record, I think the uniforms look absolutely awesome. Who would not want to wear this all the time, honestly?
fairly standard stuff during the Renaissance when they were first worn. The Swiss Guard uniform holds the distinction of being the heaviest military uniform currently in use, weighing in at over 3.5 kilograms. And it's so eye-catching that Swiss Guards stationed near roads aren't allowed to wear them for fear of distracting motorists and causing traffic accidents.
That is amazing. They actually think it's so distracting to have the uniforms. They're so bright that people can't drive. I can see that people driving, oh my gosh, and like they're trying to take videos on their phones and it causes a huge problem. I actually assumed that the origin of the uniforms was Swiss. Swiss Guard, that seemed obvious to me. But that's kind of interesting that it actually comes from some Italian traditions that even though those are gone, they're still pretty iconic the way they look. So they should never change these. These are amazing.
Each uniform is made up of 154 individual pieces, and every set is tailor-made for the soldier who wears it. A process that takes around 32 hours across 3 individual fittings. The weapons of the Swiss Guard are similarly old school, mostly consisting of halberds and a variety of swords. You may have heard that Michelangelo was responsible for the uniform's original design, but I'm afraid that's a myth spread in part by American author Dan Brown.
No way. I think Dan Brown is the guy who wrote the Da Vinci Code. Whenever the world puts together a book or a movie or a TV show that has Catholic themes in it, everybody assumes that it's all real. And so I guess he just wrote in his Da Vinci Code book, or Angels and Demons, one of them, that Michelangelo put together the Swiss Guard uniforms, and it's not even true. Yeah, just if you're watching this, please, if you watch a movie in Hollywood or a TV show or something, it's fiction. Okay, it's fiction. They're making up the conversations. They're making up things. Like the movie Conclave that came out, the 2 popes one, the Da Vinci Code, all that stuff's just made up. So they use a few true elements, but do not trust it at all.
Although, coincidentally, parts of the modern version of the uniform, which was redesigned in 1914, were based on frescoes painted by Michelangelo's Renaissance rival and fellow Ninja Turtle, Raphael. By now, you might be thinking the Swiss Guard, with their silly outfits and medieval weapons, are a bit of a joke. A mock military force that's more for show than anything else. But before you have any ideas about getting some mates together to initiate a hostile takeover of Vatican City and declare yourself Pope, I should point out that underneath the mental uniforms, Swiss Guardsmen are actually elite soldiers who undergo rigorous special training.
Yeah, I actually know a guy who used to be a Swiss Guard here in Houston, and he's a very serious guy. He actually was one of the guards who worked with St. John Paul II at the time, and he is a very serious dude that you would not want to mess with.
Uniforms I've been talking about so far are only used for ceremonial purposes and to impress the tourists. When the Swiss Guard are engaged in more traditional soldiering and other Pope protection duties, they wear modern uniforms and swap the medieval weaponry for high-tech firearms and pepper spray. In short, you really don't want to mess with them.
Yeah, so it's not just for show and tradition. These are trained soldiers who can absolutely fight as soon as they're needed.
Over the centuries, the Swiss Guard have had a fair few chances to demonstrate just how tough they are. But probably their most famous military engagement came just a couple of decades after they were founded. In 1527, 20,000 soldiers belonging to Holy Roman Emperor Charles V stormed the city of Rome, looting and pillaging as they went. Charles V was a member of the House of Habsburg, by the way. I should probably mention that whilst the rampaging soldiers were part of Charles V's army, they weren't actually sacking Rome on his orders. The men had gone rogue after payment of their salaries was delayed. Union disputes have gotten a lot less dramatic in the past 500 years, haven't they? Anyway, Rome's garrison numbered around 5,000 men at the time, meaning the city's defenders were outnumbered 4-1. Luckily, they had an ace up their collective sleeve: 189 elite Swiss guardsmen. As Charles V's soldiers swept through the city, slaughtering and stealing left, right, and centre, the Swiss Guard prepared to defend the Supreme Pontiff Clement VII. The resulting battle has since become known as the Stand of the Swiss Guard. Of the 189 guardsmen in the Pope's employ at the time, 147 held first the Teutonic Cemetery and then the steps of St. Peter's Basilica against thousands of attackers. They signed up for the Swiss Guard knowing they might have to give their lives to protect the Pope. And that time had come.
They said they are actually known for their loyalty, which is why the Pope invited them in the beginning, and that seems to be still the case.
Sure enough, by the end of the day, all 147 guardsmen were dead. But that didn't mean the stand of the Swiss Guard had ended in failure. You see, the men had known full well there was no chance of victory. There were simply too many enemies, and sheer weight of numbers would eventually tell. But the guards weren't fighting to win. They gave their lives to buy time. Because whilst they fought to the death outside the basilica, the remaining 42 guardsmen led the Pope to an 800-meter-long secret passageway, known as Passito di Borgo, that links Vatican City to the Castel San Angelo to this day. There, Clement VII successfully made his escape. He remained Pope until his death 7 years later.
So yeah, you obviously don't want to have to use the Swiss Guard in that capacity, but if they're needed, that's exactly what they're good at. So kind of extraordinary story.
If all of this sounds interesting to you, and you're keen to try and join this elite band, I'm afraid you're out of luck. Or at least you probably are, because the requirements to join the Swiss Guard are incredibly strict.
Real quick, I want to let you guys know about our Concerts for Life. Each summer I get together with an all-priest band, I write all the music, and we do a series of shows to support women in crisis pregnancies. It's a packed show start to finish. It is a blast. I really think you'll enjoy it. You can check the link below for tickets, and hopefully we'll see you this summer. So if you're watching this video and you're like, gosh, these guys are awesome, I want to join, what are the requirements? That's what we're talking about next.
For starters, the name isn't just for show. You literally do have to be Swiss to join, which rules out 99.999% of the world's population right off the bat. Not that simply being Swiss is enough, of course. Not by a long shot. Those wanting to join the Swiss Guard need first to have completed basic training with the Swiss Army. They also need to be male and between the ages of 19 and 30, at least 174 centimeters tall, and unmarried.
That's interesting. You can't be married. You have to be celibate, like me. That's what's up. I wonder why that is. I guess they just want guys who are totally committed, who aren't distracted by other things. Big sacrifice, though.
And they have to be Catholic, obviously.
That makes sense.
If you do happen to be Swiss, tall, young, unmarried, Catholic, you've won the Swiss Guard lottery. Unfortunately, I'm afraid this particular lottery doesn't pay very well. The salary for a Swiss Guard is €1,300 per month.
Whoa.
Tax-free. That's about €400 below the national post-tax average salary in Italy, and almost €3,500 lower than the national average in Switzerland. a country that's regularly ranked in the top 3 nations worldwide for the average post-tax income. On the plus side, the Swiss Guard does have one of the best retirement plans in the entire world. You'll almost certainly get to go to heaven.
Well, maybe. Yeah, it's surprising that they don't get paid very much. I guess guys want to just do this job because of the service aspect of it. And I would imagine that when you retire, you're still pretty young, you have some status and you have you have a pretty awesome resume. You could probably get some other jobs. Like, again, that guy I know who used to be a Swiss Guard has had a lot of opportunities since then and just has the character to be able to do whatever I feel like he would want to do going forward. So I'm sure the guys are set up for success afterwards as well.
Maybe it isn't such a bad career choice after all.
So I actually just read recently a story about Pope Francis and a Swiss Guard that apparently Pope Francis was doing something and it was taking a while and there was a Swiss Guard standing there. And apparently sometimes the guys, this isn't super common, but it's happened that guys, it's a heavy uniform. Sometimes they're outside in the sun and these events can take forever with the Pope, that they actually pass out sometimes. They have to kind of drag their bodies away because it gets pretty intense. And these probably aren't the type of guys to just ask for help. So at one point, Pope Francis was there and the guy was standing for a long time. And he told the Swiss Guard, hey, don't worry, you can sit down. And the guy said, no, I'm sorry, Your Holiness, my orders are to stay standing. And apparently Pope Francis said, I'm the Pope. Your orders are to sit down. And the guy sat down. Of course, he obeyed the Pope. And then the Pope actually apparently stepped to the side, went and got the guy a sandwich and brought it back to him. So kind of a beautiful story. There's just so much depth to the Catholic faith. I just love it. I love being Catholic. There's so many cool things like the Swiss Guards. So let me know what you guys think about this video in the comments below. Other stuff you'd like to see. If you want to watch another video, you can check out this one here. And we'll see you next time. God bless.